Welcome to the mansion of midnight mysteries.
Into the shadows. The Johnson family had always been adventurous, seeking solace in nature away from the chaos of their daily lives. This summer, they decided to explore a remote campsite, a place they had never been before. The allure of untouched wilderness and the promise of tranquility drew them in, and they packed only the essentials: a tent, sleeping bags, food, and a few personal items. With excitement bubbling in their hearts, they boarded the bus that would take them to the trailhead. As the bus rumbled along the winding road, the landscape transformed from suburban sprawl to dense woods. The trees grew taller and thicker, their branches intertwining like fingers reaching for the sky. The family chatted animatedly, sharing stories and laughter, unaware of the shadows lurking just beyond their sight. After a bumpy ride, they arrived at the trailhead, a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine needles filled their lungs. They set off on the trail, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath them. The path twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the forest, where sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. As they hiked, the atmosphere shifted. The cheerful banter faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. The family pressed on, determined to reach the campsite before nightfall. The sun would soon dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Finally, they arrived at the campsite, a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. They set up their tent, built a fire, and prepared a simple meal. As they sat around the flickering flames, they shared stories of past camping trips, laughter echoing through the trees. But as darkness enveloped the forest, an eerie feeling settled over them. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, and the wind whispered secrets they couldn't quite understand. That night, as they settled into their tent, the sounds of the forest grew louder. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by strange noises that seemed to come from all directions. The family huddled together in their tent, comforted by each other's presence, but a sense of unease lingered in the air. The next morning, they awoke to an unsettling silence. The sun was shining, but the forest felt different, heavier, as if it were holding its breath. They decided to explore the area, hoping to shake off the strange feeling that had settled over them. As they ventured deeper into the woods, they stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin, its windows shattered and door hanging off its hinges. Curiosity piqued, they approached the cabin, peering inside. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Old furniture lay strewn about, and strange symbols were carved into the walls. A chill ran down their spines as they realized they were not alone. A sense of being watched enveloped them, and they quickly retreated, deciding to head back to their campsite. But as they turned to leave, they found the path had changed. The familiar trail had vanished, replaced by a labyrinth of trees and underbrush. Panic set in as they wandered aimlessly, calling out to one another, but the forest swallowed their voices. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip again, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for them. Desperation clawed at their hearts as they realized they were lost. The forest, once a sanctuary, had become a prison. They stumbled upon the cabin again, but this time it felt different, more sinister. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and the air crackled with an unseen energy. As night fell, the family huddled together, fear gripping them. They could hear whispers in the wind, voices that seemed to call their names. The shadows danced around them, and the forest came alive with a haunting melody that echoed through the trees. They knew they had to escape, but the woods had other plans. Days later, a search party was dispatched. They scoured the forest, calling out for the family, but all they found was the abandoned cabin and no sign that the family had been here. Over time, the story of the Johnsons faded into the background. But the woods were alive, and they held on to the family's essence, their fear and desperation woven into the very fabric of the trees. Years later, a group of adventurous hikers, unaware of the dark history, decided to explore the same remote campsite. They were drawn by the promise of solitude and the thrill of the unknown. Among them was a young woman named Emily, an avid photographer with a passion for capturing the beauty of nature. She had heard the whispers of the Johnson family, but dismissed them as mere folklore. As they hiked deeper into the forest, Emily felt an inexplicable pull. It was as if the trees were guiding her to the cabin, urging her to uncover the secrets hidden within. The group set up camp near it, and as night fell, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That evening, while the others gathered around the fire, Emily ventured toward the cabin, her camera in hand. The air grew colder as she approached, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist around her. She hesitated at the door, heart pounding, but curiosity pushed her forward. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the symbols on the walls seemed to shimmer in the dim light of her flashlight. As she explored, she stumbled upon a journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. The entries were frantic, detailing the Johnson family's descent into madness as they realized they were trapped. The last entry sent chills down her spine. The forest is alive. It watches. It waits. We are not alone. Suddenly, a gust of wind slammed the door shut behind her, plunging the cabin into darkness. Panic surged through her as she fumbled for her flashlight, but it flickered and died. The whispers returned, louder now, swirling around her like a tempest. She could feel the presence of something ancient and malevolent, and she knew she had to escape. With trembling hands, she pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew more insistent, and she could hear the faint echoes of laughter, children's laughter, mingling with the haunting voices of the forest. Desperation clawed at her as she pounded on the door, calling for her friends, but the forest swallowed her cries. Just as she felt the shadows closing in, the door creaked open, and she stumbled out into the night. The campfire flickered in the distance, a beacon of safety. She ran, heart racing, but as she reached the clearing, she found her friends frozen in place, staring into the darkness with wide eyes. "Emily," one of them shouted, breaking the spell. "What happened?" They're here," she gasped, breathless. "We have to leave. Now." But as they turned to pack their things, the forest shifted around them. The trees seemed to close in, the path back to civilization disappearing into a maze of trunks and branches. The air grew thick with an oppressive energy, and the whispers intensified, wrapping around them like a shroud. In a panic, they grabbed their gear and began to run, but the forest twisted and turned, leading them deeper into its heart. The laughter echoed around them, taunting and mocking, as if the woods were relishing their fear. They stumbled upon the cabin again, its presence looming like a dark specter. "Stay together," Emily shouted, trying to keep her friends focused. But one by one, they began to drift away, drawn by the whispers that promised safety, warmth, and the comfort of the familiar. Each time Emily turned, she saw another friend vanish into the shadows, their faces contorted in fear and confusion. Finally, it was just Emily left, standing alone in the clearing, the forest closing in around her. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices urging her to join them, to surrender to the darkness. But deep down, she felt a flicker of defiance. She refused to let the forest claim her. With a surge of determination, she turned and ran, pushing through the underbrush, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she had to escape. The trees seemed to part for her, guiding her toward a faint glimmer of light in the distance. As she burst through the final thicket, she found herself at the edge of a small clearing where the moonlight bathed the ground in silver. In the center stood a massive tree, its trunk gnarled and twisted, with roots that seemed to reach out like fingers grasping for the earth. The tree pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and Emily felt an inexplicable connection to it, as if it were a guardian of the forest's secrets. But the whispers were still there, swirling around her, urging her to turn back, to give in to the darkness. She could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on her, the shadows creeping closer, but she stood her ground. The memory of her friends, their laughter and camaraderie, fueled her resolve. Taking a deep breath, Emily approached the ancient tree. Its bark was rough beneath her fingertips, and she could see the same strange symbols carved into its trunk, glowing faintly in the moonlight. She closed her eyes, focusing on the energy radiating from the tree, and whispered a silent plea for help. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices rising to a fever pitch. The shadows around her writhed and twisted, and for a moment she felt as if the forest itself was alive, reacting to her presence. But then, in the midst of the chaos, she heard a familiar voice, a soft, gentle call that cut through the noise. "Emily, help us." It was the voice of one of her friends, echoing from the depths of the forest. Panic surged through her, but she knew she couldn't leave them behind. The tree seemed to respond to her determination, its roots shifting and parting to reveal a hidden path leading deeper into the woods. With a final glance back at the clearing, Emily steeled herself and stepped onto the path. The whispers faded slightly, replaced by a sense of urgency. She followed the trail, her heart racing, calling out for her friends as she moved deeper into the shadows. "Chris! Ron! Where are you?" she shouted, her voice echoing through the trees. The forest felt alive around her, the branches swaying as if trying to guide her. She pressed on, the path winding and twisting, until she stumbled upon a small clearing illuminated by a soft, ethereal light. In the center stood her friends, their faces pale and drawn, surrounded by the same symbols that adorned the cabin and the tree. They were entranced, their eyes glazed over as they swayed gently, caught in the forest's spell. Emily's heart sank at the sight, but she knew she had to act quickly. "Please, wake up," she cried, rushing toward them. She reached out, grabbing Ron's shoulders and shaking him gently. "You have to fight it. Please. We need to get out of here." Emily blinked, her eyes clearing as she focused on Chris. "Emily? What's happening?" she gasped, shaking off the haze. Ron followed suit, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he realized the danger they were in. "The forest, it's trying to keep us here," Emily urged, glancing around as the shadows began to close in again. "We have to break free." With newfound determination, the three of them joined hands, forming a circle. They focused on the light emanating from the tree, drawing strength from its ancient presence. The whispers grew louder, but this time they were resolute. They would not succumb to the darkness. "Together!" Emily shouted, and they began to chant, their voices rising in unison. The symbols around them glowed brighter, pulsating with energy as they called upon the forest to release them. The shadows recoiled, the whispers turning into anguished cries as the forest fought against their defiance. With a final surge of energy, the ground beneath them trembled and the shadows began to dissipate. The light from the tree enveloped them, and in that moment they felt a connection to the very essence of the forest, a bond forged in courage and unity. As the darkness receded, the path back to the clearing opened up before them. They ran, hearts pounding, the forest now silent as if it had surrendered. The cabin faded into the distance, and the oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a sense of freedom. Bursting into the clearing, they found the campfire still flickering, the night air calm and serene. The moon hung high above, casting a gentle glow over the campsite. They collapsed onto the ground, breathless and shaken, but alive. What just happened? Chris panted, looking around as if expecting the shadows to return. I don't know, Emily replied, her voice trembling. But let's get out of here. Now. They quickly packed their belongings, adrenaline fueling their movements. As they prepared to leave, Emily glanced back, a mix of fear and awe coursing through her. The woods had tried to claim them, but they had fought back, and for now, it seemed they were free. As they hiked back to the trailhead, the sun began to rise, casting golden rays through the trees. The forest, once a place of mystery and dread, now felt different, more like a guardian, albeit a watchful one. The shadows that had once loomed so ominously now seemed to retreat. The trio walked in silence, each lost in their thoughts, the weight of their experience heavy on their hearts. They exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. They had faced something unimaginable together, and it had changed them. As they reached the trailhead, the familiar sight of the bus stop brought a wave of relief. Later, they climbed aboard the bus, the driver giving them a curious look as they settled into their seats, still shaken but grateful to be alive. The bus rumbled to life, and they watched as the forest receded behind them, the trees standing tall and silent, as if bidding them farewell. Once back in town, they shared their story with some locals, but many dismissed it as a tall tale, a product of overactive imaginations fueled by fear. Only a few listened intently, their expressions grave, as if they understood the truth behind the whispers of the forest. Days turned into weeks, and the experience lingered in their minds. Emily found herself drawn to her camera, capturing the beauty of the world around her, but the haunting memories of the forest remained. She often returned to the edge of the woods, standing at the boundary where civilization met the wild, feeling the pull of the woods. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she decided to return to the forest, this time with a sense of purpose. She wanted to confront the shadows, to understand what had happened to her and her friends. Armed with her camera and a flashlight, she ventured back to the trailhead, her heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. As she hiked deeper into the woods, the familiar sense of unease washed over her, but she pressed on. The path felt different this time, as if the forest was guiding her, leading her to the heart of its secrets. She arrived at the clearing where the ancient tree stood, its presence both intimidating and comforting. The moon hung high, illuminating the symbols carved into the tree's bark. Emily approached, her heart pounding, and placed her hand on the rough surface. She closed her eyes, focusing on the energy that pulsed beneath her fingertips. The whispers returned, but this time they were softer, almost melodic, as if the forest was inviting her to listen. She closed her eyes. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me what happened." In an instant, the world around her shifted. The shadows danced, swirling in a mesmerizing pattern, and she found herself transported to a different time, a vision of the Johnson family, laughing and setting up their campsite, blissfully unaware of the darkness that lurked just beyond the trees. She watched as they explored the woods, their joy palpable, but then the atmosphere changed. The forest grew darker, the whispers rising to a crescendo as the family began to realize they were lost. Emily felt their fear, their desperation, and she understood the pull of the forest, the way it ensnared them with its beauty and then turned against them. The vision shifted again, showing the family huddled together in the cabin, their faces etched with terror as the shadows closed in. Emily felt their anguish, their cries for help echoing in her mind. But then she saw a glimmer of hope, a flicker of light emanating from the tree, a connection to the forest that could be harnessed. With a surge of determination, Emily reached out to the light, feeling its warmth envelop her. She understood now that the forest was not purely malevolent, it was a living entity, a guardian of its own secrets. The Johnsons had been drawn into its depths, but they had also been given a choice, a chance to fight back. As the vision faded, Emily found herself back in the clearing, breathless and filled with a newfound understanding. "Thank you for showing me the truth," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. "I promise to share your story." As she opened her eyes, she noticed something new, a small, delicate flower blooming at the base of the tree, its petals shimmering in the moonlight. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, vibrant and alive, a symbol of hope and renewal. She knelt down to examine it, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. In that moment, she understood that the forest was not just a place of darkness, it was also a sanctuary, a living entity that held both beauty and danger. With her camera, Emily captured the flower, the tree, and the surrounding beauty of the forest. She knew that these images would serve as a reminder of the balance between light and dark, the importance of respecting nature, and the power of unity in the face of fear. As she made her way back to town, she felt a sense of closure and peace. The whispers of the forest had transformed from haunting echoes into a gentle reminder of the interconnectedness of all living things. She now knew that even in darkness, there is light to be found.